Well, guys, I want to welcome you to Overtime, where we take Sunday's message further and deeper. And today I am super excited because we are in part 2 of this series called Brick by Brick, where this week we talked about moral authority. And moral authority is the greatest thing we can do to grow our influence, which ultimately, if we grow our influence, it leads to strength, it leads to endurance, and ultimately it leads to just something better. And I think we desire better in life. And so moral authority is that whole thing to go, hey, you know, what I say and what I do matches up, and what I do and what I say, there is consistency, there's integrity with that. And moral authority is so important in our lives and so important in our leadership and so important in our relationships. So I'm really excited to take this conversation further because we get the privilege of having Michael and Jen DeHaven. So welcome.
Thank
Excited
you.
you guys are with us. And for those of you who don't know Michael and Jen, I have known you guys for, it feels like forever, but it's like legit, what, 11 years, 10 years, 12 years?
10 years.
10 years.
About 10 years.
Yep.
Yeah. And I remember the first time Jill and I met you guys, we went to dinner at Papacitos.
Yes.
And Papacitos is fantastic. Their fajitas, I think, on Wednesdays, half-price fajitas.
Yeah.
Did you guys know
can't beat
that?
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
But
it's
that-
like, yeah. So
we may have dinner plans for this week now.
Exactly. And if you get their butter sauce, it's fantastic to pour
I
on your
forgot about the
fajitas
butter
and all.
sauce.
Yeah, you got to get the butter sauce. But anyways, the first time I met you guys was there, and just hearing your stories and how you guys were, coming from, Atlanta, Georgia, and we talked about your church experience there, and there was such consistency, and I thought, wow, this is so cool. And then over the last 10 years, just being on the other side of you guys in terms of, serving in our children's ministries, leading our large groups, giving all kinds of insight into different stages and transitions of North Point in terms of leadership, leading small groups. You guys have led small groups, a ton of different small groups. And Jen, you pioneered Pathfinders,
Right.
which is for special needs
Yes,
parents. And just that conversation, just to navigate that, you have navigated that well.
Oh, thank you.
And so you guys launched that, and Michael, you were in full support of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, you were right there.
I was there by her side. But
Yeah.
she was doing the heavy lifting and
Which is
taking
awesome.
that, which was great.
Yeah. And now you're leading an LDG group, which is Ladies Leadership Development Group.
Yes, I am. Super
And
fun.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear. And that's one of our next level groups.
Yes.
And Michael, you're serving as one of the elders here at North Point.
Absolutely.
And so you can actually fire me, which is kind of
I
weird.
could.
Yeah,
I could.
I know.
So treat me well today.
I
And so,
know. I'm a little
you know.
nervous.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So you guys have served in so many roles, and I'm so grateful for that. But what else would you just share, like just, with the listener going, hey, here's a little bit about us?
I think it's important to know we met each other in high school and became friends, started dating.
What age
and
were you guys when you met?
We were 15.
15 when you
Yeah.
met?
Yes.
Wow. And was it love at first sight? Was it like, oh my gosh, he's the one, she's the one?
It was kind of funny. I kind of saw something in her and she didn't realize. I wasn't quite clear with my communication, so I got a lot of help with my homework for a couple of years, and then that gradually I was like, oh wait, he's interested in more. So anyway, a couple of years. I mean, it was almost 2 years into a really, really good friendship of really. I think we called each other best friends, and it's the kind of thing where we would hang up the phone with our respective boyfriends, girlfriends, and call each other to catch up after we had talked to the person we were supposed to. So
behind the scenes, all of it was going on.
It was.
It was.
Yeah. And so that relationship developed. We went to college, and then we got married. So now we've been married 24 years.
Wow. Now, where'd you guys go to high school again? Where'd you grow up?
Westfield, New York.
Okay.
So small town in Western New York.
Wow. New Yorkers.
Yeah.
You're here.
Yeah, rural New
rural,
Yorkers.
Okay.
like grape country.
Yes.
Yeah, not what you think of when you think New York.
No, not big skyscrapers
No.
and
No.
busy streets. And
Nope.
Yeah.
Not at all.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
So you said you've been married how long?
24 years.
Wow.
It's a long time.
That is
Yeah.
a
In a good
long
way.
time.
Yes.
That's cool.
Right.
Did you guys get married at 15?
No.
How old?
Now, if you look at her, you'd think that. Not me.
We
but
were 21.
Okay.
21.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we went on and started having children pretty quickly. And so we are now the parents of 5 children. much like you, Buck.
Goodness. Well, we were
5.
talking before the podcast, and I said I thought I feel like you guys have like 40 children.
Yeah.
And you say 5, and that still feels like that's a ton of kids. And then you reflect, I have 5,
Yeah,
which I feel
know.
like I've got 2.
Yeah.
But I really have 5. But anyways.
Ours are just spread out a little bit more. They
Yes.
range in age from 22 to 4.
Yes.
So
Goodness.
We were on the slower plan of
Yeah.
adding to our family.
right.
Yeah.
You get pushed into different conversations. I think some of that will come up as we go through our talk. But there's a whole array that we get to experience with that broad
Yeah.
range.
Yeah, that is a big gap.
Yeah.
Big gap.
Yep.
Yes.
So you're busy. Yeah.
Yes. Very busy.
Yeah, a
For
little
sure.
bit.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Well, thank you guys again for just coming on, and it's been great to be on the other side of you. And one of the reasons I've asked is because I've just seen your moral authority. I've seen this. What you say is what you do, and what you do is what you say. And there's such consistency with that. There's been such character. We've been through a lot of ups and downs together, and some tension points and some gaps. And the way you guys have handled those is one of the things I'm like, when I think of people with moral authority, I think, oh, DeHaven's, like, Michael and Jen. And so I'm really excited to have this conversation. And
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
kind of jump in to go a little bit further. So I'm just curious, one of the kind of central statements in this whole series is from John Maxwell, and he talks about, I put it on the screen several times, and I said, or he says, everything rises and falls on leadership. And that's just, the more I think about that, I'm like, man, that is a heavy statement. But it comes with, decades of his observations, of research, of just seeing all these different, for-profit, non-for-profit organizations. And that's his statement. He's like, man, I'm telling you, everything rises and falls on leadership. So how do you guys, when you hear that, how do you process it? What do you think? Do you agree, disagree?
Yeah, I can easily say I agree. It's one of those things where, I think one of the other things John Maxwell has said, is if nobody's following you, you're not leading. So you might, and I remember when I left college, I went to undergrad as a management, business management major, and I left school and I was like, I'm ready to manage people. And they're like,
I got my certificate. Here I go.
Right, here we go. I'm ready to be a manager. And it was eye-opening, and there's kind of this inflection point where nobody came to me initially and said, well, you're not actually ready. You just went to school. But, from that point forward, moving through parts of career and family and all of that, there was that awareness that, we had to be living in a way. Like if I aspired to be leading and I aspired to be managing, and, that had to be focused on the follow through and the discipline and the being real to even be in any way attractive to be followed. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
I mean, it is. It's like, are we willing to lean into that? Or, it's, and I think that's part of the weight of the statement is it brings some like self-awareness. It's like a reflective mirror to go, gosh, if things are not rising and they're actually falling in my life, one of the questions to ask is, am I responsible? Is there something I'm playing in this part, to create my circumstances or my relationships? And that's a really hard thing to face. And that makes the statement really tough too. How about you, Jen? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I just really think that leading well takes intentionality. It takes time, commitment, and like you said, self-awareness, reflection, introspection, and all of that is super, super important. And one of the things I like that you said, Buck, was that leadership means influence. And so all of us have influence in different areas of our lives. And so we might not have a title that calls us the leader of something, but we're still, as we have influence on others, we're showing our leadership qualities.
And it's so cool that we can grow it. Like that is a way forward for all of us, is that we can grow our influence. Like that's proven. And so all of us are leading, all of us are influencing, and all of us can grow, which means that the Proverbs 28 verse that talks about when there's intelligent, sensible leaders, you see the strength and you see endurance and you see things get better. And I love that. I love that God designed it that way, that we can take steps forward. Yeah.
Well, and with that intentionality, it takes work. Like it's not easy. And I mean, I think we all know this.
It just was like a button or
right,
something.
right.
Yeah.
But like over the years, I think we've all taken time to to study leadership, to follow, to understand what it takes. And it's but it's not something that I think it only comes naturally for a very, very small percentage of the population. But it doesn't mean that, in our professional lives, in our church lives, in our family lives especially, if we're not good at it, we can work on it. We can make it better.
Yeah, which is so cool. And we were talking before the podcast a little bit about, our kids, and I was talking about one of my sons is like, really wants the benefit without doing the work, wants the outcome without doing the work.
Yep.
And I think oftentimes we, like you were saying, hey, I graduated and I want to go ahead and lead the organization and, be the CEO or that kind of thing. But it's like, gosh, that really is going to require some intentionality, as you were saying, Jen, and it really does require work. And that's part of it that I think makes it a little bit difficult. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious, as I alluded to earlier, one of the reasons I ask you guys to come on is because we have said, at conference tables together with, individuals, you guys have asked some of the greatest questions about some of the decisions we've made as a church. And, in all the ups and downs over the last decade, something I've seen is just moral authority, like this integrity that I see on the other side, and the way you've handled those. And there's a curiosity and, the accusation about here's what you're doing before you go there. You're like, okay, I'm curious, like what's happening. And just when we've asked you to do different things, like the way you've handled that, like everything just feels like on the other side of you guys, like with character, with moral authority, with integrity, and you've made a lot of sacrifice, which is part of how we get moral authority. So I love that. Like, I am so grateful, beyond grateful for your willingness to display that. But I'm just curious, like, is there something that, like, is the catalyst or is the driving force behind why that's so important to you guys, that you think about intentionally that just creates moral authority in your lives?
So I went back and I kind of thought, like, through my life, like, was there an inflection point where this became real to me? And I kind of realized that very early in life I was on, like, I saw a demonstration of moral authority and follow through and, kind of personal discipline on one side of my life. And there were other areas where I was let down in times when as a kid I didn't feel like I should have been let down. Mm-hmm. But I had this beautiful contrast, and I think a lot of people would interpret that as, you're being hurt and the pain and all that. But for whatever reason, God put in my heart to, like, really acknowledge that this contrast was there and say, I want to be like that. Yeah. Like, I want to be on the side as an adult and as I grow. I want to learn from the experience of both of those, and to be the person who follows through, the person who understands, and strives to understand where we're going and to cast vision to that, and to do what it takes to try to make it through, and to not be distracted by the motion of the wind or whatever, but just say, there's a place that we can go together. Let's get there. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, it really, like, for me, and I think Jen's probably got some of her own perspective on it. But for me, I think it really goes back to early in my development of just seeing how much it hurt.
Yeah.
When
it's not present.
When it's not there.
Yeah. Well, that can be a great catalyst. It's one of the things to go, I've seen when it's not right, and I don't want to do that to the people around me or with my kids. Right. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. How about you, Jen?
I think I've always been an observer of people. And so as I was growing up and saw people making what I thought were wise decisions versus unwise decisions, I kind of studied what that meant for them. What did it look like for them? And I tried to emulate that myself because, I don't know, it just, loyalty is important to me, honesty, all those character qualities, just really young. It's always been my bent to kind of respect people who I really think are making wise choices and who are thinking through them and who are not just self-focused but others-focused. And so I feel like that helped to define part of who I became as I grew and developed, for sure. Mm-hmm.
I love that. Yeah. And that's what it feels like on the other side of you. Like, it's one of those, the passage in the scriptures or in the Bible that says, hey, they're slow to speak, quick to listen. Like, right. That's you. Like, you feel like an observer, like you're watching, going, okay, what are you thinking? And you ask great questions, and I really appreciate that about you.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, we definitely do not do it perfectly. And
sure, yeah.
Man, it's a process.
Yeah, and one of the things, one of the reasons why we ask you to be an elder and go through the whole process of that was because one of the things, and I really appreciate about you, Michael, is that you're not scared to say, like, what's on your mind, and if you see a gap gap. And like I need that / we need that as a church to go, we want people on our elder board, we want people who are leading, who are willing to kind of lean into the conversation, lean into what's happening, do that with moral authority, with integrity and with character, but yet call us on the carpet when it needs to be and say, hey, here's a gap. We need to talk about this. And I really appreciate that dynamic, how you hold that intention.
Yeah. And I think with that, I think it comes out in things that you've seen directly. It comes out in our parenting. And what I was saying just a second ago is when I'm in situations, I always strive to understand the end game. Mm-hmm. Like, where are we going? Where does this organization want to go? Where does this individual want to go? Where do we want to take our kids? Mm-hmm. And times where we had a gap, and had to deal with those things. I knew that you and I and other folks in the organization, we had a consistent vision for where we needed to go long term. Mm-hmm. And seeing a gap, and obviously nothing's going to be perfect, but just maintaining focus on all right, we got to figure out how we get there. Why let a little bit of garbage, a short-term season of disconnect or whatever, why let that distract from that? I think it even comes in our marriage, times when we've struggled. I'm like, part of my goal in our marriage is to be old together. Yeah. And but not just to be old together. Right. But to be old and happy. Yeah. And
which is so important. And that's, part one of the whole series of Brick by Brick, it was discover your why. Mm-hmm. And that's really discovering your long-term, outcome. Right. What's the deeper motivation perhaps beyond you? What's the why beyond the why beyond the why that really gives you the motivation for character, the motivation for integrity, the motivation to say, hey, it needs to be consistent with what I say and what I do. And we're going to be imperfect. And it also gives you the motivation to say, I'm sorry. Right. Hey, because you have clarity on the long-term picture. Yep. And I think that's really important. Well, you guys have mentioned it a couple times, and I'm just curious. So you have, again, I think 40 kids. You say 5, but it seems like far more than that. And it seems like I have far less than that as I say that. But, on the other side of you as parents, we've talked about parenting. Michael, you and I have talked about some of challenges that I've had, and I'm like, man, how would you think about this, and how would you approach this? And part of the reason I ask that of you is because I see you guys in parenting, and I see your kiddos, and it's just incredible. And I think in part is it's a result of moral authority. I think it's a result of what they've seen behind closed doors. So can you speak to that in terms of how important it is? And I alluded to that on Sunday, but as a parent, we so want the hearts of our kiddos, but it goes hand in hand and really hinges on our moral authority to really capture their hearts and their minds and their conscience.
I think I want to start by just laying a little groundwork about what our family looks like, because it's definitely played into how we parent. Yeah. And the way that we're balancing multiple seasons of life at the same time. So I would say we spent the first 17 years of our marriage probably what you would expect as an average family. We had 3 children. We homeschooled. We're involved in the homeschooling community. They were involved in activities, music lessons, serving at church, just all the general things that you would expect of a average family.
Sure, yeah.
And so I guess when something's easy, it's just not always going to stay easy. And in 2014, God just deeply impressed on our hearts the desire to adopt. And we followed that path that led us through fostering to adopt, which is how we met the baby who would become our son officially, Shay. And so that process was hard, and it was a roller coaster and ups and downs, and we were supported well by family and friends, and it came through the court system that we were going to be able to adopt him, and we were like, oh, okay, we made it through that rough patch, man. Our family's complete, beautiful family of 6 now. We have 3 girls and a boy, and then we found out we were pregnant with Kenzie.
Voila, so we surprise, surprise.
Yeah, okay.
Beautiful surprise.
So now we're a family of 5, and then with 5 children, and then shortly after that, we also discovered she'd be born with Down syndrome. So not only are we now the parents of 5 children, including one who's been adopted, now also including a child who has a disability. And all of those pieces work together, I think, to make our family super unique and very much not average anymore.
Yeah, I'd have to agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gosh. And the everyday things that are coming your way.
Yes.
I mean, the dynamics of your family have got to be, certainly some joys and awesome moments. And,
Yes.
But also some challenges, I would imagine.
Yes, and a little bit overwhelming. I think one of the key points that really sticks out in my
You said
mind.
a little bit.
A little.
And then
a
you
little,
laugh,
yeah.
which means a lot at times.
Yeah, I mean, when I think back April of 2016, Kenzie was born April 22nd. Caitlin graduated high school 1 month later, and then Shay's adoption was finalized the very next day. So
Goodness.
within 1 month of time, we had these major life changes and shifts. And I remember driving Caitlin to drop her off at college and ordering a crib for Kenzie on my phone on the way there. And I'm like, what is this irony? We're launching our first child into adulthood, and we have a baby. And a
Yeah.
toddler, and
Wow.
a preteen, and a teenager who's
Yeah.
in the midst of driving and starting to think about college. So
Yeah.
it's a lot of different ages and stages we were trying to balance all at the same time.
There's
Yeah.
so much context.
Yeah,
And-
for
Yeah.
sure.
And it doesn't go away. Like it continues on. We were just taking an assessment of conversations we had yesterday with our kids, and we've got one conversation with a 14-year-old where we're completely geeking out, or 15-year-old, sorry, but completely geeking out over the term or the phrase, as far as the eye can see. She's like, well, what does that actually mean? Can we go deep on that? We're with another, I'm working on matching pitch, singing "Jesus Loves Me," and another one we're having corrective conversations about how to how to handle losing a video game, and and then Jen's got conversations with our older two that are in completely different context.
Right, talking about futures and class schedules and majors, and then connecting with our oldest daughter who's now married and living her life with her husband in Dallas, and yet still keeping that relationship, right, and connecting well with her.
Yeah, so many seasons. And something that I'm just curious about is, my oldest son, Sam.
Yes.
We were talking about him, and he's 18, so he's getting ready, the college stuff, and we're looking. But the thing with my oldest son is there's a first. Everything's a first. It's the first senior in, high school. It's the first son or kiddo to be 18. It's the first one to go to college. It's the first. And so there's so many first, which means I make a ton of mistakes.
Yes.
And then, after those, I'm like, oh, man, I wish I would have, known that. I wish I would have, And then with my younger sons, I'm able to kind of take the lessons I've learned and be able to apply some of those, to the best of my ability with my younger kiddos. So you guys have such a huge range.
Yes.
That I would imagine that dynamic is present to some degree. And I'm just curious how much that really impacts, your, moral authority when it comes to your character, your integrity, your intentionality, and all that kind of stuff.
I think that absolutely plays in. And I actually was talking with our oldest earlier this week a little bit about this, kind of how she was our guinea pig child. And
The first.
yeah. And also it was the added dynamic as she was going through the first, the beginning of the end of her childhood. We were also, dealing with a 2-year-old and a baby with special needs. And so that definitely pulled some of our attention from her. And that was a gap that we had with her. And I think she has a great head on her shoulders. And so I think we kind of essentially launched her into independence a smidge before she was ready. She was kind of like, I felt like I could do it, but at the same time, I would have liked a little more support.
Right.
And so we really had to own that. We are sorry. It is not normally like this, and we were distracted, and we didn't balance well enough. But thank you for talking with us about this, because it's hard stuff for her to deal with. And
Right.
I just think the fact that she's willing to talk with us about hard things is super important.
Well, I as you're talking, I just think it's so important what you're saying because, she was able to come to you. So you've created the environment where she can say, hey, here's a gap.
Yeah.
Which is really tough for our kids.
Yes.
Especially depending how our philosophy or how we parent them. Hey, as parents, sometimes we're not approachable. And that your willingness to say, I'm sorry.
Oh, yes.
That it goes so far. I've heard so many great communicators, so many great authors just say the words "I am sorry" to your kids. Brene Brown even talks about our most vulnerable moments with our kids is when we teach them the very most. And it's like those are the big moral authority moments to go, oh, mom and dad are listening. They see me. They are acknowledging what I felt, and they're engaging in that conversation, and they're owning their piece of the pie.
Yeah.
That's so good that you guys did that.
Well, and,
sure.
but I think it's also important to note that that it's good for that to start early. Like I can think of times in the last year where I've gone to our 6-year-old Shay, at least one, maybe two or three times where I've had to apologize to him. It's like I responded, reacted to a moment that might have led towards correction, or was in a bad place mentally and just flipped out or whatever, because obviously we're not perfect. Those kind of things are going to happen. But I can think of times where I've just knelt down in front of him and said, buddy, I'm sorry. But I want him to see that. And one of the things that I've also worked with him on is not just saying I'm sorry, like when he needs to do it or when I do, but to say, I'm sorry, will you forgive me? And I remember a moment we were laying in his bed a couple months ago when we were really focusing on that because he was all stressed and he was beating himself up, over a mistake he had made. I'm like, just try this. Just take a moment and say, Dad, I'm sorry, and then follow it and say, will you forgive me? And watch what happens next. And I looked at him in the eyes and I'm like, yes, I forgive you. And the release that kid felt was unbelievable. And he just looked at me and he smiled and he's like, wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So good. And it's such an amazing thing how it's a reflection of what our Heavenly Father, how we can relate to him. And so much of us, the way we relate to God or think about God is impacted by our fathers and is impacted by parents and really impacted about the content we're talking about. And the better we can do that to go like, hey, there's a place to go. I love you. I see you, but I love you unconditionally. Right. Like you are forgiven. And that, that really helps our kids see God clearly, which I love. So you guys spoke about, one of the things is just saying I'm sorry, which I think is a great character builder. But on Sunday, I also talked about, the idea of character, just like, hey, what you say and what you do. I'm willing to do, a very difficult thing regardless of the cost. And character can be like we're talking about, I'm sorry. Character, can certainly be, having to admit your mistakes in that. And, there's a lot of aspects of character. And then I talked about sacrifice, talked about time, small deposits of character and sacrifice. So how do you guys hear that? Or what do you guys think in terms of, would you add anything to that? Is there anything that you felt like are other kind of building blocks to really get to the heart, get to the mind, get to the conscience of our kiddos?
I think it's super important to not rescue our children. Like we're designed for struggle, and it's not our job to eliminate struggle for them. And speaking of our Heavenly Father, right, we have struggle in our own lives. He could take it away, right? But through the struggle is where you have growth and maturity. And I think as parents, in addition to that, in being the ones who help walk our children through the struggle and the big emotions involved in that and making the wise decisions. Something that I've learned over the years is, as I struggled with my own perfectionism, is if I was always appearing perfect to my children, when they came up against their own struggles, they wouldn't know what to do with that. Like, wait a minute, this isn't the way it always looked at home. It was important for them to see us struggle. And so that's where we started just inviting them into the process as we struggle through hard decisions. Our family has had some ups and downs as we really wrestle with making wise decisions, and how sometimes that comes with sacrifice of money or time or saying no to something that is really amazing, but it's just not the wise thing for that season of life. But if we're not modeling that to our children, that we are dealing with that as well, I think it's very difficult then to expect them to be able to do it well into adulthood. And that's something we want for our kids.
Yeah. That's so good. That's so good. I love that. And I think there's a quote by, I'm going to get it wrong, it's like Joseph something. I know that's not helpful. But he says, who we are teaches our children far more than what we say. And so I just think like that idea to go, like when you're willing to model that, I think Can you hear my watch?
I can
I
hear
can.
your watch.
Yeah.
That's
This is-
amazing.
This is Siri listening to this podcast. I mean, she's really interested in
tuned
what
in.
we're saying, which
Perfect.
is, maybe this is a really important point.
She's learning and growing. So.
Yeah, apparently some moral authority Siri needs. Anyways, but I just think, what you display, and that is part of moral authority, is saying, hey, we're struggling. We're inviting God into this process. This is really tough. We don't know. This is going to come at a cost. And I love that you do that. And I think that's a great building block to say, hey, we're not perfect.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
We are not perfect.
Yeah.
No, we're
Yeah.
absolutely not. I think another tool that we use as a building block is that in moments of correction with the kids, we try really, really hard to route the message that we're delivering to them to a character trait. So, it's easy to, and I've seen parents do this, kids will run into a house and the kids will go directly to furniture and just start jumping up and down on the furniture. Well, of course, don't jump on their furniture. Well, why? Why should you not just jump on furniture? Well, it's disrespectful. That's disrespectful to their property. So the character trait, I wouldn't correct them and say it's wrong to jump on furniture. I would say it's disrespectful to jump on furniture. So we'll talk about honesty. We'll talk about integrity, which is a harder one to explain.
Sure.
Trust. So, they're really, 5, 6, 7, core character traits. And we try, like I said, try really hard in almost every moment of discipline where a kid's going to go to a quiet chair or have time out, whatever it might be, to say the reason why is that this character trait was kind of broken.
Yeah, and see, it feels like it circles back to intentionality, and and that's more long-term thinking versus pragmatic thinking. And it's really easy, in the I can get pretty reactive. I'm like, okay, stop that, or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's when you spend the time maybe in more neutral emotion to think about, well, what are we trying to teach them?
Yeah.
What are we going to discipline them around? When are we going to lean in and let them face the natural consequences? And it just comes back, and I wish there was a button to hit to go hit it, and we got it all.
Right.
Man, we know how to parent now.
The easy button.
Yeah, but it really is that intentionality, spending that thought, thinking about the long-term outcome, thinking about what we want to teach our kids. And I think that's a catalyst and a fuel to obtaining moral authority
Right.
in our
I think
homes.
so.
Yeah.
Yep.
Anything else you guys would add to that conversation, or just in general add to, what we're talking about today with moral authority and character and time and sacrifice? And
I think it takes some communication between us to make sure that we're parenting with the same goals in mind. And our kids know, they know to choose wisely if they're going to ask for something. We're like, you can't double ask. We have a no double asking rule. So if you ask mom and she says no, don't ask dad,
I
or
want a
you'll
cookie,
be in trouble.
Can't go twice.
Right.
So choose
we teach
wisely.
them to play us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a life
okay,
skill.
if dad looks like he's in a better mood, go talk to him about it.
Yeah.
Right.
And sometimes I'll even say if my kids come to me with something where I'm just not wanting to make the decision, or I know I'll more likely say no, I'll be like, oh, you should probably ask your dad.
Yeah.
So I don't know. We try to be on the same page that way. And also, if we do maybe disagree with how one of us is handling something, we try and wait to discuss that later behind closed doors. So it doesn't look like we're, nitpicking each other in front of the kids. Like we're a united force.
Our kiddos, or at least mine, will pick up on that. And
Oh,
they're
yeah.
like,
It's a crack
Mom's
in the
a softie
armor.
or dad's a
Yep.
softie, and hey, we're gonna, divide that whole thing up.
Yeah.
Well, and I think similarly, I try to. I think we both try to work from a principle of if the kids see us react with a great amount of passion towards something, flip out, get crazy angry, whatever, they've essentially won the chess match.
Yeah.
They have. They're like, I know how to do it. I know how to crack them. I know how to, because
their
so
buttons.
much of parenting, it's just like a beautiful game. It's an important game. But
Sure,
if you use kind of game theory with it, it's they make a move, we make a move. You're teaching things. You're trying to nudge in this direction, whatever.
Yeah.
Lots of strategy can be played into it. Choosing which battles you're going to go after, like all those things. But maintaining composure, staying calm, taking a deep breath, being self-aware enough to know, I'm too emotional to speak right now. I just should say nothing.
Yeah.
Right.
Things like
and just remembering our end game with our children is raising children who express, great character traits, who make wise decisions, and who choose to spend time with us. We want relationship with our children.
Right.
Yeah.
And again, comes back to intentionality.
Yeah, for
with
sure.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think also, like part of our goal, part of our end game is maintaining influence. You know, whether the kids are 4 or 40, God has still given them to us with the responsibility of being there to guide them appropriately. So, you know, we'll choose battles and you know, make decisions from that lens of, you know, once we've launched them, when they're adults, will this decision that we're making today influence the likelihood that they're going to come back to us when they're 23, 25, 45, whatever it is, and say, hey, you guided me wisely a long time ago. What do you have for me now?
Yeah. That's so good. It's so tough. It's so tough, especially depending on personality.
Of course.
And my personality is a little bit more reactive. Like I'm like, oh, okay, you know, whatever it is. And like we were talking before the podcast, one of the things, you know, with one of my sons was asking to switch schools, and I was like, man, you know, I'm pretty opinionated. I'll tell you what I think, and I gave him some of my thoughts, but I just said, hey, you know, for this one, I really want you to go find what wisdom requires of you, like what's wise, and because I think there's arguments on both sides, and you know, here's kind of the way I'd lead, but I want you to go make a decision, and trying to empower them, and for them to feel like, okay, Dad trusts me, Mom trusts me, and just walking with them, you know, hopefully helps build the bridges of the future.
Right.
Of that, you know, future desire to come home, future desire to have relationship, and the fact that, I mean, they need us. You know, it's like, hey, the first years of marriage, and they're going to bump into things, and how we so wanted Mom to be there, or Dad to be there, to teach us how to, you know, navigate those complexities of marriage, and how to grow old well, and you know, as our kids get in these different seasons, you know, oftentimes, if our parents or we didn't have that connection or bridge, then, you know, we try to figure that out on our own, and we repeat a lot of mistakes that are just unnecessary. Yeah. So I love you wanting influence.
Yeah, there's an interesting point there, too. One of the things that we tell the kids, probably when 10, 12 years old in that range, we're like, take notes. Take notes on us. Yeah. Like, you know, as you'll someday, you know, probably be a parent, you'll probably be a spouse to, you know, to someone, but watch us and, you know, like literally write it down somewhere, the things where you see that we've made a mistake, or you don't agree with the way that we've approached a situation, and change that for the next generation.
Yeah. Which is fantastic. Yeah. And even this week, I'll just say this, and then if you guys have anything else to add, but this week, in light of, you know, what I was saying on Sunday, a couple of my sons were in service. And so I'm curious, like, you know, I'm talking about, you know, parenting and how important it is, and, you know, our families and relationships, and what you say and what you do, you know, is moral authority. And that just gets to the hearts and the minds and the conscience and all this kind of stuff, and gains influence. But as I'm saying that, you know, there's a piece of me that's going, what are they thinking?
Yeah.
Because they see me behind closed doors. They see, you know, they hear my words, and I'm a broken man. And, you know, I've told them that multiple times. Hey, sons, you know, I'm broken. I'm so sorry about this. Yep. And so I think even being willing, you know, right condition, right climate, emotional climate, but to sit down. And I asked my sons yesterday, I said, hey, you know, you heard what I said on Sunday. I said, is there any discrepancies between what I say and what I do, and what I do and what I say? Like, is there anything that's hurting you from, like, really trusting me and coming to me with? And it was fascinating. And, you know, one of the things that I would share is, you know, one of my sons said, you know, Dad, like when, you know, you're mad at us about something and then somebody else comes over, like you can flip a switch pretty easy and you're like, hey, everything's great. And then like the door closes and you're like, okay, we're going to talk again. And they said, you know, that causes us concern. And it was a great discussion because I'm like, but I'm not mad at them. I'm mad at you.
Right.
And so
I can compartmentalize. What's wrong with that?
Yeah. But it was a totally fair point. And I said, you know what, I'm going to really think about that. And I invited them into that conversation. But I think being willing to even ask the question about moral authority, it's so tough to do it because I don't want to hear like, man, I've missed the mark, or but I'd rather know that because, you know, today's a new day. God's mercies are new every day. We can start over. And, you know, now I can have good information to move forward.
For sure.
So, hey, thank you guys for being here and
Yeah,
having this
thanks for
combo.
having
And
us.
I'm just curious, you know, as we wrap up, any last things you would add, or anything else that you would just say for, you know, this conversation would be helpful?
I think you touched on it a little bit. Just each of our kids are unique and individual and created in the image of God. And we need to be willing to listen to them when they do come to us with stuff. And I think the way we parent, it could be exactly the same for each kid, and they're going to receive it differently because they're different individuals. But I do think it is important to make sure that you are kind of adjusting your style as you're reaching the hearts of your children to really reach it personally, because each child is an individual.
Yeah.
I love that. That's really important.
I think the one final thing I would add on is really about the marriage relationship too. And I know not every family is going to have the same dynamic that we do maritally and all that, but it's not easy to be married for 24 years, and not every day and not every week or month or maybe year. I don't know. You could tell me. But we've had our huge ups and our huge downs. But it's important for, I think for our kids, and part of, moral authority is them seeing the integrity in our relationship.
Right.
And the realness. Yeah. So, not completely hiding moments when we're disagreeing, or when things are great or not so great. Like, just letting there be some visibility into that. But also the intentionality of investing and understanding and letting the kids see it, because it'll affect how they handle their marriages and relationships in the future. But, letting the kids see that when things might be a little bit rougher, we'll take extra time to go on dates and to focus on each other. And they're like, "Are you going on another date?" I'm like, "We need that right now."
Yeah.
We do.
Yeah.
We need some time to talk.
It's in your best interest that we take time.
Yeah.
So, but just a month ago, we were going through a rougher time, and we went out and had some hard, like crazy honest conversations, and decided to do a little bit of study together, and in a very short amount of time, we had a dramatic redirection in some things that we were struggling with, but it was just like took time to listen, time to pay attention, and I know the kids are feeling the difference in the dynamic.
Absolutely.
Just in the matter of a couple weeks.
Yeah.
But I think it's just important to note the kids are watching our marriages. The kids are watching us like hawks all the time.
Right.
They pay attention, and Caitlin told me once, she's like, "Oh yeah, I knew back at this certain season you guys were really struggling." And I'm like, "Yeah." And she's like, "I was worried." They know. And but seeing the discipline and letting them see that we're committed to the end goal.
Yeah.
Is
For sure.
Such an important point.
Yeah.
So with the intentionality, I know we talked a lot about kids and parenting and family dynamics, but I think equally so to marriages. And our marriages speak volumes to love, and speak volumes to our imperfections, and speak volumes to moral authority when it comes to our kiddos. So I love that. Well, guys, thanks again for just being willing to have this convo and hanging out a little bit and being honest and authentic about some things that are happening in your lives. And I just really appreciate everything you guys do, and the way that you serve, and the way that you love, and the way that you strive to model Christ to your kids and to those that you lead, and to our church and to me. So just thank you.
Well, thanks for having us today.
Yeah. All right. See you guys.
See you.
Bye.